The wild girl in the green shadows jungle woke up slowly. Sunlight dripped through the thick green leaves, touching the damp ground in broken shapes. In the distance, a bird gave a sharp cry, and somewhere nearby, water splashed over stones. Ethan Cross stood still, breathing in the heavy air. He was deep in unknown land, far from roads, far from cities. The world here felt untouched and alive. He had been in many wild places before, but this jungle felt different. It was too quiet. Even the monkeys seemed to watch him from a distance. His local guide had left the day before, refusing to go. Deeper, spirits live here, the man had whispered, not safe for humans. Ethan had smiled at the superstition until he saw her die happen in a moment. A flicker of movement in the shadows. Not a monkey, not a deer, something faster. He turned his head sharply, scanning the green maze. Then he saw her, a girl, standing half hidden between giant roots, staring right at him. She was barefoot, her skin painted with dirt and faint glowing lines that moved slightly, as if alive. Her hair was long, silver white, tangled with leaves. Around her body, she wore nothing but a wrap of woven vines. She looked young, maybe 17, but her eyes, they were old. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. Ethan felt his breath catch. There was no fear in her gaze, but there was no welcome either, only watchfulness. Like a wild animal deciding if he was a threat. Then, with one smooth step, she melted back into the green dot. Ethan took a few steps forward, pushing aside vines. The place where she had stood was empty. No broken branches, no sound of running feet. It was as if she had been part of the jungle all along. He spent the rest of the day searching. Twice, he thought he saw her again, once by the river bank, once on a moss-covered rock. Each time, she vanished before he could get close. That night, he made camp near a small stream. As the firelight flickered, he thought about her. She was clearly human-shaped, but something about her was different. Those glowing lines on her skin, the strange way she moved, too silent, too quick. She wasn't just some lost villager. She was something else entirely. In the middle of the night, he woke to a faint sound, the rustle of leaves just beyond the fire's light. He didn't move, only turned his eyes. There she was again, crouching low, watching him. The firelight touched her face, and for the first time, he saw something in her expression, curiosity. Slowly, Ethan reached for his canteen and placed it on the ground between them. "Water," he said softly, though he doubted she understood. The girl tilted her head, listening as if the word itself was strange music. She took one step forward, then another. Her hand reached out, quick, almost too quick, and she snatched the canteen, pulling it back as if expecting him to grab it away. She sniffed it, then drank, her throat moving fast. After a moment, she set it down and stepped back. Ethan didn't move toward her. He knew if he did, she'd be gone again. For a long second, she simply looked at him, her silver hair shifting in the night breeze. Then she turned and disappeared into the dark. When morning came, the jungle felt less empty. Somewhere out there, she was moving, watching, waiting. Ethan didn't know who she was or where she had come from. All he knew was one thing. He couldn't leave until he found her again. This was no ordinary jungle girl, and deep down, Ethan had the feeling that meeting her had just changed the path of his life forever. His first contact morning in the jungle began with a slow golden glow, spilling across the tops of giant trees. Ethan had barely slept. Every sound in the night, every snap of a twig, every rush of leaves, made him wonder if she was near. He packed his gear and set out again, determined to find her. For hours, he followed narrow animal trails, crossing streams and pushing through walls of ferns taller than himself. The air was heavy with the smell of wet earth and blooming orchids. Birds screamed above him. At once, a shadow passed overhead, a giant bird or something stranger. But Ethan didn't stop to look. His mind was fixed on the girl. By midday, the jungle opened into a clearing, where a waterfall crashed down into a turquoise pool. Mist filled the air, cooling his face. He stopped at the edge, wiping sweat from his brow, and then he saw her. She was perched high on a mossy rock, her knees drawn up, arms resting on them. Sunlight touched her silver hair, making it glow like strands of metal. Water droplets clung to her skin, tracing those strange glowing lines that seemed almost alive. She wasn't hiding this time. She was watching him openly, like she had been, expecting him. Ethan's heart thudded in his chest. He moved slowly, stepping into the shallow water at the edge of the pool. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said softly, knowing she likely didn't understand. His voice was gentle, but carried over the roar of the waterfall. She tilted her head, the same curious motion he had seen last night. Then her eyes narrowed, as if measuring the truth of his words. Ethan reached into his pack and pulled out a small packet of dried fruit. Without taking his eyes off her, he opened it and placed a piece on a flat rock halfway between them. He stepped back. The girl didn't move at first. Her gaze shifted from him to the fruit, then back again. Finally, she slid down from the rock. In a graceful, silent motion, her bare feet touched the water without a sound. She approached like a wildcat, slow, light, ready to leap away. When she reached the offering, she picked up the fruit and sniffed it. Her nose wrinkled at the strange smell, but she took a small bite. Her eyes widened just a little. She didn't smile, but her shoulders seemed to relax. Ethan noticed something then. Faint scars on her wrists and ankles, like marks left by rope or metal cuffs. They weren't the kind you got from climbing trees or walking barefoot. These were man-made. Someone had kept her captive. Before he could speak, she stepped closer. She raised a hand toward his chest, but stopped an inch away, as if she was testing an invisible wall. Then, just as suddenly, she pulled back, eyes flashing with something sharp, distrust, maybe fear. She spun and bounded back onto the rocks, climbing higher until she was just a silver figure in the spray. "Wait," Ethan called. But she was already gone, vanishing into the dense green. Frustration tightened in his chest, but it was mixed with something else, a growing certainty. She wasn't simply a feral child living in the wild. There was a story here, a dangerous one. And if those scars were what he thought they were, someone might still be hunting her. That night, back at his camp, Ethan kept the fire low and his ears open. He thought of her moving through the jungle, how she had studied him, how she had tested him without speaking. She was cautious, yes, but she hadn't run the moment she saw him this time. She had come closer. Ethan knew what that meant. The next meeting could change everything, but it also meant he had to be ready. Because the more he found out about her, the more he suspected she wasn't just different. She might not be from this world at all. Secrets of the fallen star jungle at night was a living thing, breathing, whispering, moving in ways that made the skin prickle. Ethan lay in his small camp, staring at the soft glow of the embers, thinking of her. He hadn't seen the silver-haired girl since the waterfall, but he could feel her presence, like a shadow moving just beyond sight. Then it happened. A natural light pulsed in the distance. It wasn't the yellow flicker of fireflies or the cold white glow of moonlight. This was different, a bluish shimmer that seemed to pulse, as if alive. Ethan grabbed his flashlight, but didn't turn it on. Instead, he followed the glow through the trees, careful to place each step in silence. The jungle closed in around him, vines brushing his arms, branches catching his shirt. The sound of his own breathing felt too loud. The light grew stronger, until he reached a massive, ancient tree whose trunk split open into a hollow. The inside was warm with that strange blue glow, and there, curled up like a sleeping fawn, was the girl. She wasn't asleep. She was holding something, a jagged shard of metal, about the size of her forearm, etched with symbols that twisted. It shifted like living ink. The glow came from it, casting soft blue light across her face and the strange markings on her skin. Ethan froze. His instincts told him this was no ordinary object. The symbols weren't any language he had ever seen. They moved, rearranging themselves slowly, as though the shard was alive. The girl's eyes opened. In the dim light, they looked even more alien, deep, liquid, and far too sharp. She clutched the shard to her chest and hissed, "Not yours." The words were broken, but clear. She spoke. Ethan raised his hands in peace. "I'm not here to take it," he said gently. I want to understand." But she didn't seem convinced. Her gaze was fierce, and for a moment he thought she might run again. Then, instead of fleeing, she began to speak in a low, rapid voice, not in English, but in a language that felt like wind and rain mixed with something metallic. The shard in her hands pulsed with each syllable, almost as if answering her. Ethan's heart pounded. This wasn't just some tribal relic. This was technology, advanced alien technology. And if she had it, then she wasn't from here. He glanced at the scars on her wrist again, and the truth clicked into place. Whoever had captured her before hadn't just stumbled across a strange girl in the jungle. They knew what she was. They knew about the shard, and they wanted it. The girl suddenly pressed the shard against her own skin, and the glowing lines on her body flared brighter, connecting like a map. Ethan caught his breath. It was as if the shard was part of her, or perhaps hers in a way no one else could claim. A distant sound shattered the moment. Voices, faint but getting closer. The girl's eyes widened, and she leapt to her feet in one fluid motion. She looked at Ethan, really looked, as if weighing whether to trust him. Then, without warning, she grabbed his wrist and pulled him deeper into the trees. Her grip was strong, far stronger than it should have been for her size. She moved quickly but silently, weaving through the jungle like water flowing around rocks. Ethan followed, his pulse racing. He didn't know what was coming or why, but something told him that if they caught them, it would be the end. When they finally stopped, miles away from the glowing tree, she dropped his hand and backed away, breathing hard. The shard was still in her grasp. She pointed at him, then to the jungle behind them, and said one word, danger. Ethan didn't need a translation. The chase through rain and forest rain came first, heavy, hot drops pounding through the leaves like the jungle itself was trying to drown its own secrets. Ethan and the girl moved quietly through the undergrowth, her bare feet making no sound, his boots sinking into the mud with every step. They hadn't spoken since she'd warned him. She stayed ahead, glancing back now and then, eyes sharp, body tense. The shard never left her hands. Ethan knew she didn't trust him completely, but she trusted him enough not to leave him behind. The first hint of trouble came as a smell, smoke, faint but wrong. This was no cooking fire. It was sharper, hungrier. The girl froze, nostrils flaring. Then the wind shifted and Ethan saw it, an orange glow far through the trees. Fire. He breathed. The girl's head snapped toward him. Hunters, she said in that clipped, broken English. Her voice was flat, almost cold, but her eyes betrayed a flash of fear. They heard it next, the low hum of an engine. Ethan's mind raced. The hunters weren't just tracking her, they were flushing her out. Fire was the oldest trick in the book, and in a place where the jungle was everything. It was deadly. The glow grew brighter. Branches popped and cracked in the distance as flames began to climb. The smoke thickened, curling through the trees like ghostly fingers. The heat pressed against Ethan's face even from far away. Come, she barked, grabbing his wrist. Her strength still startled him. She pulled him toward a narrow gap between tree roots, ducking low. They ran, weaving through vines, leaping over fallen logs. The roar of the fire growing louder behind them. Suddenly, the forest floor sloped steeply downward. Ethan stumbled, sliding in the wet mud, barely catching himself on a root. The girl didn't falter. She was part of the jungle, moving with a speed and precision no human could match. But then came the shouts, men's voices, angry, getting closer. They weren't just behind. They were circling around. Ethan's heart pounded. They're cutting us off. He shouted. The girl stopped just long enough to look at him, then at the jungle around them, scanning fast. Without warning, she grabbed his shirt and pulled him toward the sound of rushing water. They burst through a wall of ferns onto the bank of a raging river, swollen from the rain. It was deep, dark, and fast, a dangerous place to swim. Ethan shook his head. No way we survived that current. She didn't argue. She just pushed him in. The cold hit him like a slap, stealing his breath. Before he could panic, she was beside him, one arm around his chest, kicking hard. The current tore at them, spinning them into the dark, but she moved with it instead of fighting. Her grip was like iron. Behind them, the fire roared and the shouts grew fainter. The jungle became a blur of green and smoke as the river carried them away. Ethan coughed and gasped, swallowing water, but she didn't slow until they were far from the danger. Finally, she dragged him toward a quiet bend in the river where the water was shallow and calm. They collapsed on the muddy bank, both breathing hard. Rain pattered on the leaves above, cooling the air. Ethan turned to her, ready to thank her, but stopped. She was watching the tree line, eyes narrowed, every muscle ready to move again. They will not stop, she said quietly, until I am gone or dead. Ethan swallowed hard. For the first time, he realized this wasn't just about curiosity or mystery anymore. This was a fight for her life, and now, whether he liked it or not, for his. The city of last rain followed them for 2 more days. As they moved farther from the jungle's burning edges, the air grew thinner, the trees smaller, and the ground harder under Ethan's boots. By the 3rd morning, The forest gave way to a cracked asphalt road. For the alien girl, it was as if the world had split open. She stopped at the edge of the tree line, her bare toes curling into the wet soil, refusing to step onto the black surface. Cars hissed past in the distance, their headlights cutting through the mist. She tilted her head at the strange growls of engines, her eyes narrowing with suspicion. Ethan stepped onto the road and held out his hand. "It's just a path," he said gently, different from the ones in the jungle. She didn't move. Instead, she crouched low and touched the asphalt with her fingertips, as though testing whether it would burn. When it didn't, she stood, slowly, and followed, her gaze darting between the strange metal beasts rushing past them. The first glimpse of the city hit her like a wave. Towers of glass and steel rose from the ground like mountains made by humans. Neon lights blinked and flashed in colors she seemed to drink in with wide eyes. The sounds were everywhere, honking, shouting, music spilling from shops. The air was thick with smells, fried food, exhaust fumes, perfume. She stopped in the middle of the sidewalk, overwhelmed, and covered her ears. Ethan guided her into a quieter street. "You'll get used to it," he assured her, though he wasn't sure if she would. Her breathing slowed, but her gaze stayed, sharp, scanning every moving figure like each one might be a threat. They stopped outside a clothing store. Through the glass, mannequins stood frozen in bright dresses and warm jackets. The girl's eyes lingered on a pale blue dress with delicate stitching. "Come on," Ethan said. "You can't walk around wrapped in vines forever." Inside, the warm air smelled faintly of new fabric and perfume. She froze, unsure, when the door chimed. A saleswoman glanced at them, her painted smile fading when she saw the girl. She whispered something to another employee, who chuckled. Ethan's jaw tightened. The girl noticed too. She turned her head slowly toward the whispering women, her eyes narrowing until their smirks faltered. Without a word, she walked deeper into the store. Ethan picked a few simple pieces, jeans, a shirt, a jacket, and held them out to her. She took them, puzzled, and glanced toward the fitting rooms when he nodded. She disappeared behind the curtain. A few minutes later, she stepped out. The jeans clung awkwardly to her legs. The jacket hung loose, but Ethan smiled. "You look human," he said softly. For the first time, she gave him something close to a smile, small, uncertain, but real. The saleswoman approached, still wearing her brittle smile. "If you can pay, sir, I suggest you do it quickly," she said pointedly, her eyes flicking to the girl. Ethan's hand tightened around his wallet, but before he could speak, the girl stepped forward until she was inches from the woman. Her gaze was unblinking, sharp as glass. For a moment, the air between them seemed to hum. The woman's smile broke entirely, and she stepped back, muttering something about getting the bill ready when they left the store. The girl still wore the jacket and jeans, the blue dress folded neatly in a bag. She carried it like something precious. That night, in a small rented room above a quiet cafe, she sat by the window, staring out at the city lights. Too loud, she murmured in broken English. "Too many eyes." Ethan nodded. "I know, but here, you're harder to find." Her eyes shifted toward him. "No," she said softly. "They are already here." Ethan's stomach sank. "Who?" She looked back at the street below. "The ones who took me before." Memory she couldn't escape. Heath rain had stopped, but the streets outside their small rented room still glistened under the glow of street lamps. The city was alive even in the dead of night. Footsteps on wet pavement, distant horns, the low hum of passing engines. Ethan sat at the small wooden table, flipping through an old guidebook, but his mind wasn't on the pages. She hadn't spoken for hours. The alien girl, still nameless to him, sat by the window, her knees drawn up, the blue dress resting across her lap like it was something sacred. She traced the fabric with her fingers as if trying to understand its purpose. Her eyes were far away, staring through the glass at the street below. "You've been quiet," Ethan said gently. For a moment, she didn't respond. Then, without turning, she spoke in halting English. "I remember." Ethan set the book down. "Remember what?" Her voice was soft, almost childlike, but every word carried weight. "The ship, fire in the sky. We fall." She touched her chest, then pointed upward. "Home far." Ethan's breath caught. He had suspected, but hearing her say it confirmed everything. She wasn't from here. She kept going, the words coming slowly, broken but sharp. "Soldiers come, not your kind, other kind." Her face tightened, metal cuffs, cold, no light. She pressed her wrists together, showing him the motion of being bound. He saw it, the scars, the fear in her eyes. You escaped. He guessed. Her gaze flickered to his. They want this. She reached into the folds of her jacket and pulled out the shard. Even in the dim room, his alien symbol shifted like molten silver. Without this, I am lost. Ethan leaned forward, lowering his voice, and with it, she hesitated, then whispered, "It calls home." Before he could ask more, movement outside caught her attention. Her body tensed instantly, every muscle coiled like a wild animal sensing danger. She leaned forward, eyes narrowing at something below. Ethan moved to the window. A black vehicle idled at the corner, its engine barely audible. The windows were tinted so dark he couldn't see inside, but the way it sat there, not moving, not leaving, made his skin crawl. "You know them?" he asked. Her answer was immediate. Yes. The car's headlights flicked on for just a moment, washing the street in pale light before going dark again. Ethan felt the weight of unseen eyes staring up at them. "They can't know we're here," he muttered. Stepping back from the glass dot, she stayed where she was, still watching. Her breathing slow but controlled. "They know," she said simply. A sharp knock at the downstairs door made both of them freeze. 3 knocks, a pause, then 2 more. Ethan's mind raced. To deliver it to be random. They would not stop, she whispered. Her hand tightened around the shard until its glow bled between her fingers. Ethan crossed the room to grab his pack. "That we don't give them the chance." They left through the back stairwell, slipping into the narrow alley behind the cafe. The air was damp and smelled faintly of garbage and rain. Somewhere nearby, an engine started, not the black car, but another, a signal dot. As they moved quickly through the alley, she suddenly spoke again, voice low. "They take me once, never again." There was no fear in her tone now, only a cold, dangerous certainty. The flight to the starless alley stretched before them like a narrow black vein, slick with rain and lined with rusting fire escapes. Ethan's boots splashed through shallow puddles as he kept close to the girl, her silver hair glinting faintly under the flicker of a single street lamp. Somewhere behind them, a door slammed. Voices followed, not hurried, confident. They knew there was no easy way out. The girl moved with purpose, not panic. One hand gripped the shard, the other brushed the wet brick walls as though she was counting her way forward. Ethan kept scanning for an escape route, a back road, an unlocked door, but she seemed to know exactly where she was going. They turned a corner and emerged into an abandoned rail yard. Empty freight cars stood like silent giants, their rusted sides streaked with years of rain. Beyond them, the city lights seemed far away, muted by the low fog rolling across the gravel. "This is a dead end," Ethan whispered, her eyes catching the dim light, flashed with something that wasn't fear. "No," she said, "it is a signal ground." Before he could ask, a shadow moved at the far end of the yard, then another. Figures stepped into the open, dressed in dark, heavy gear, their movements sharp and deliberate. There were 5, no, 6, and they were armed. The girl's fingers tightened around the shard until its glow became a steady, fierce blue. "Stay behind me," she said, her voice low and calm, almost a calm. One of the figures called out in a language Ethan didn't understand. The girl answered in the same tongue, her words clipped, defiant. Whatever she said made the men fan out, form in a half circle. Ethan's heartbeat hammered in his ears. "They're not here to talk," he muttered. "I know," she replied. The lead hunter stepped forward, reaching for something at his belt. The girl lifted the shard high for a moment. Nothing happened. Then the ground seemed to hum under Ethan's boots. The blue light pulsed brighter, spilling across the wet gravel in thin rivers. The hunters hesitated. One barked in order, but their steps faltered as the air above began to shimmer. It was like heat haze, only colder, so cold Ethan's breath misted in front of him. Then, with a sudden flash, the haze split open, revealing a dark shape descending through the fog. It wasn't a helicopter. It wasn't anything human. The craft moved without sound, its sleek silver surface rippling with blue energy. Light poured from its underside, scattering the fog in glowing waves. The hunters panicked first, broke ranks and ran, but the others raised their weapons. The girl stepped forward, the shard blazing now, and a beam of light from the ship shot down to meet it. Ethan shielded his eyes. The sound was a deep, resonating hum that he felt in his chest more than heard. The hunters fired, but their bullets hit the beam and dissolved into sparks. The girl turned to Ethan. For the first time, Her expression softened. "Friend," she said simply. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, she pressed something into his palm, a second shard, smaller but pulsing faintly with the same alien light. "Why," he began, but she was already stepping into the beam. The light wrapped around her like a living thing, lifting her gently from the ground. Her silver hair streamed upward, her glowing markings flaring in intricate patterns. The hunter's shouts faded under the deep thrum of the ship. Ethan watched as she rose into the fog, the beam carrying her into the craft. A final flash, and she was gone. The ship tilted slightly, then shot upward with a speed that made the clouds swirl in its wake, and then it was nothing but stars. The rail yard fell silent. Only the distant hum of the city remained. Ethan looked down at the shard in his hand. Its glow was softer now, almost like a heartbeat. He didn't know if he would ever see her again. But somewhere, in the vastness above, she knew his name, even if she had never spoken it aloud. And deep in his bones, Ethan felt the truth. This wasn't the end of their story. It was only the beginning.